Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Sandy Thornton, Director of Finance and Treasurer of the Golden Crown Literary Society. I want to welcome you to the 2020 GCLS Virtual Con and to the Making a Living from Writing panel. For those of you new to GCLS, we recognize and reward quality literary works about women who love women and provide learning opportunities, encouragement, and assistance to new and established writers. We have a highly respected writing academy, an annual gathering of hundreds of readers, writers, publishers, and editors, and a monthly GCLS members-only online book club. We invite you to learn more about GCLS and perhaps become a member by visiting our website, goldencrown.org. The GCLS would like to thank everyone who continues to support us through their donations. If you would like to make a donation, go to our website and click on the button Donate. Okay, here are a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. We'll have about 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the session for Q&A. We'll try to get in as many questions as we can. Feel free to use the Zoom Q&A box to submit a question. And if you run into technical issues, log off and log back in, and that usually resolves most issues. That does it for the announcements. We hope that you enjoy the presentation, and I'd like to turn the session over to your moderator, Susie Carr.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this session. We are super excited to be able to have this session talking about how to make a living as a writer. We have an incredible lineup. We have a panel with wonderful creative authors who I'm really excited to introduce you to right now. So I will start with that. We'll start with Amanda Radley. She's a hybrid author from the UK who has released more than 16 novels in less than 4 years. Her debut self-published novel, Huntress, won the Lambda Literary Award, and her summer rom-com from last year, Second Chances, is a finalist in this year's Goldies. She gave up her marketing career and position as managing director of a digital marketing agency in order to make stuff up for a living instead. She claims the similarities are startling. Next, we have Jay. Jay is the author of 21 award-winning romances between women. She lives in the sunniest city in Germany, near the French and Swiss borders. The writing bug bit her at the age of 11. She used to work as a psychologist, but gave up her day job in 2013 to become a full-time writer and part-time editor. As far as she's concerned, it's the best job in the world. When she's not writing, she's an avid reader, indulges her ice cream and stationery addictions, and watches way too many crime shows. Next, we have Heightened Stephenson. She had no idea 5 years ago that she would be writing, publishing, and making a career from romance. In almost 3 years, she has accomplished much, including a Goldie Award at the GCLS convention in Pittsburgh 2019 for her book, The Promise. She is a co-host on the popular vlog and podcast show, We Should Be Writing, with Amanda Radley and Emma Sterner Radley. And her book, The Doll Maker, was recently adapted for a live action reading with Books Office. She is an avid traveler and a big Liverpool FC fan. When she is not writing, you can find her in a plethora of coffee shops, locally or abroad. Next, we have Melissa Braden. She is a multi-award-winning author of 17 contemporary romance novels and enjoying the ride. Though writing romance is her full-time job, much of that is spent on coffee, wine, donuts, and staring off into space. Kissing scenes remain her favorite. Sure. Next, we have Lise Gold. She's an author of lesbian romance. Her romantic attitude, enthusiasm for travel, and love for the feel-good stories form the heartland of her writing. She goes by Write What You Know and is often found in exotic locations doing research or getting inspired for her next novel. Since publishing her debut novel, Lily's Fire in 2017, Lise has written 11 romantic novels. So there we have it. We have an incredible panel, and I think we just want to get started on these questions because we had some great questions come in. Amanda had put out a survey on her website and invited people to submit their questions. And so we're going to take the questions for today from those. So the first one I'm going to ask, I will start with Claire. How many copies of a book does a top-selling GCLS author sell with 6 months of releasing a book? And how much net profit would they make from those sales? This is a multi-tier question, so we maybe can start with, just start with those questions.
It's difficult to say because every book's different. So you could have a hit one time and then the next one will bomb and doesn't sell anything. So that's the risk. What will sell, you know, you might sell just 200-300 copies in one, and then the next time it will sell 3,000-4,000 copies. It's just hit or miss, really. You just got to put everything out there and just hope for the best and hope you've got all your eggs in the right places and none of them drop out and crack. But as for money, I mean, I don't know. It's just all, it can be anything. I can have a month where I take like, you know, $1,000 and then 2 months later, you're looking at $3,000-4,000 or more or less, or it's all over the place. So I don't know. It's hard to answer with a definitive figure.
Mm-hmm. So. Amanda, a second part of that question, maybe you might want to answer is, how much does it cost on average to get a book published or released for sale?
That's another really difficult question. It's a sort of how long is a piece of string question, but most people will need to have your book edited and will need to have a cover created. So if you think about costs like that, it's also good if you're having your book edited to have it proofread, because an editor's not necessarily going to pick everything up, and as many eyes as possible that go on that manuscript, the better. So if you're sort of saying that a cover might cost around $200-250, talking US dollars freeze, you might be spending roughly $400-500 on editing, maybe $100-200 on proofreading. So there's sort of some ballpark figures, but it's very difficult because it depends what your skill set is. I think most of us wouldn't bother to try to edit our own book. I think the idea is to try to get the best possible product out there, and while you may save yourself some money at the start, the second someone comes across any errors, they're not going to want to carry on. So it's about getting that best product out there, and that does mean, if you're a self-published author at least, then putting that cost out there. If you're a published author, traditionally published, then you don't pay anything. So it's depends in which direction you want to go.
And that sort of brings me to Jay, from a traditional publishing standpoint. Could you elaborate a little bit on this, illuminate?
Yeah, if you're traditionally published, of course, your publisher will or should cover all of the production costs, meaning the editing, content editing, copy editing, sensitivity readers, if you have some for your book, proofreaders, formatting, covers, all of that will be covered by your publisher. The only thing that the author has to pay for is her own marketing. Even if you have a publisher, you will always have to do some marketing. So I pay for things like my own website, if I'm running ads, or my newsletter service. That's the stuff I pay for.
Excellent, thank you. Melissa, what was the tipping point that let you realize you could actually make a living writing?
Yeah, that was a great moment when I realized it was a possibility, because I think honestly, when I went into the concept of writing my first book, which was, you know, a decade ago now, I really did imagine that it would be maybe a nice little side hustle, take a vacation here and there if I had some extra funds. And that's what it started off as, quite honestly, and that's what it felt like. But then, you know, the more you write and the more books you have out there, the more, you know, titles you have contributing to your royalty check. And so once I had a handful of books under my belt, and I started realizing, you know, that number is rising, this could be something. And I was curious, like pie in the sky, maybe I could be a full-time professional writer someday, but probably not going to happen. And then it started getting to the point, I think it was around book 5, when I was into the Soho Loft series that was selling really well at the time, that I went, this is starting to pay me more than my full-time job did. And so I started paying attention and watching, and I wrote a couple more books. And once you pass that mark, and then you double that figure and you see it start going, and it's a scary leap to make, but not at the same time if you have some time underneath you to understand that this is consistent and this paycheck can continue to happen. And I hear so many aspiring writers who think that that's not ever a possibility, that if I choose to be a writer, I won't make much money and I'll be a starving artist my whole life. And I just hate that myth, because if you do well, then the reality is you can easily support yourself. And, you know, I'm not going to get into necessarily hardcore numbers, but I will say that this is the most lucrative job I've ever had, and it's very attainable.
Lise, do you have any insights on this? You've been published since 2017, and so I'd love to hear your take on this as well. Oh, you're muted.
Hang on. Yes, you can hear me now. I agree, definitely. I mean, it is the most lucrative job I've ever had too, and I've had good jobs in the past, so I also don't really want to get into numbers per se, but yeah, definitely. I think the tipping point when I thought that I could make a living from writing was around when I wrote my second book, when my second book was out, and I think it was more of a gamble that I took because I saw it going up, and I thought if this continues, then by my third I could definitely make it work. So that's when I quit my job too. And I think once you go full time, then you have so much time to do things that you don't have time for when you have a full-time job on the side. And of course it is a gamble. But I think those extra things were for me essential to make it work too. So, you know, things like marketing, for example, or social media, you don't have time for that when you work and you want to write a book on the side. So yeah, I think I'm not sure whether I think the fact that I quit my job and I had so much time on my hands all of a sudden, I think that's why it worked. A lot of people think I was lucky, but actually I've been working 16 hours a day for a very long time now. So
Yes, it does require amazing sacrifices to be able to put out books and to be able to put out good books. So yeah, kudos to everybody. So I have, as the topic of racism and women loving women literature has come to the forefront in recent days, it seems there might be a challenge for BIPOC authors to make a living from writing. It's hard not to notice that this panel is made up of all white people. Amanda, do you feel the reason why this is the case is because of this disparity in the literary world?
I think it definitely plays a part, yeah. Firstly, the reason we have this makeup of this panel is because the way GCLS works is that you have a member of GCLS who proposes a panel and then has to find the panelists on most occasions. Now, I propose this panel, and there's no mistake that most of us are from the UK or Europe because they're the people who I socialise and hang out with and I know about. So the only way I'm going to be able to create a panel of specifically of authors who make a living through writing is by people who I know, and that's not going to be many if I don't go to GCLS conventions and things like that. But there is the wider issue, obviously, that we do not have many authors of colour and they need to be fed into the system somehow. And I think one of the issues we have is that it's such a huge project. If every single publishing house took on 10 authors of colour today, we wouldn't see those books for years, just because of the way publishing works. It takes a long time. So for people to say we want action now is very important, but you won't get action today, tomorrow. So that's why this is a really important thing that we need to talk about every day and every week to ensure that that feeds all the way through, so that we know in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, we have more diversity. But yeah, absolutely. The reason we don't have very many authors of colour at the moment is because there's a barrier to entry somewhere. And I think that's for all of us, that we need to be more approachable, and we need to demystify the whole publishing process, be it self-publishing or traditional, because I think a lot of people are sort of unaware of the whole process, what it goes through. They're a bit frightened by it. They don't think they're good enough. There's a lot of gatekeeping and a lot of barriers to entry every single step. Even if you self-publish, there's the whole am I good enough argument that you have with yourself on a weekly basis. So I think that's for authors and publishing houses to be more open, and to try to help to get people in, and to definitely try specifically hard to get diversity in.
Yes, thank you, Amanda. That was a great answer, and completely agree with you. There's a lot of awareness that took place, which is incredible, and it's a wonderful thing that the awareness has just taken place. That's how change happens, and I'm looking forward to being part of that change. So let's move on to talking about writer's block. Okay. Claire, can you talk about, when you have writer's block, what is your go-to to get back into your writing?
I have two things I do. I'll either start writing something else, or I go out, have brunch with my friends, forget about it and don't give a toss. I just wait until it comes back. But sometimes if it takes a little bit too long, then I just start on something else, and either that will carry on and I'll just carry on with that, or it will just jumpstart me to go, oh, this is boring, I'm going back to what I was doing. And so yeah, that generally works for me. So I've always got like probably 3 or 4 whips on the go. So yeah,
that's great.
Just jump around.
Jay, what about you?
I don't get writer's block. I've never had it. I think it's partly because I'm a plotter. Most writers I know are pantsers, so they just sit down and write and see where the story takes them. And I think that it's easier to develop writer's block that way. And since I plot out the story before I even sit down to write, and I create character profiles, I basically always know what happens next. I might deviate from the outline, but I'm never sitting in front of a blank page. But of course, I helped other writers overcome their writer's block. So I would say, as Claire said, let the manuscript sit for a while, like at least a week or 2, and then read it through from the beginning. And sometimes just the time away will enable you to come back to it with a fresh mindset. And then suddenly it seems obvious. And if that doesn't help, I would say get some beta readers or critique partners and let them read the book and see if you can brainstorm a solution. And I might add, sometimes the problem isn't actually writer's block. Sometimes we think it's the writer's block, but especially for people who write for a living, it might actually be that they are completely burnt out. And what they need is, the problem is not with this particular story, it's more that they are not taking the time to refill their creative well, and they need a long vacation, or they need some reading time, and they need to step away for a while.
That's really solid advice. I run into writer's block a lot. That's very solid advice. Lise, have you ever had writer's block? And if so, what happens? What do you do to overcome it if you do?
Well, I've luckily never had a long stint of writer's block, but just like everyone, I've had bad days or even weeks. So I just find it good to step away to do something fun or to go on a trip. And I usually sing because it puts me in a good mood. And I think mood's very important for writing. And yeah, other things that put you in a good mood, like nice food, glass of wine, candles, anything can help. I know it's not that simple when you have very serious writer's block, but I've never had that, luckily. So.
Well, you're always inspired by your exotic locations too. That must help.
Yes. Well, not at the moment.
Well, no, that's true.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I'm getting through it.
Melissa, do you ever run into writer's block?
Oh, yes, I do. I long to be like Jay and to have it plotted out with the characters fleshed out before I sit down to write. And I've tried that. It's just unfortunately not going to work with my process. I'm very much a pantser. So what I have found is that this is my job. And if it's not there, then I will sit in front of my computer until it is there. And I will not turn on a TV show. Sure, I never do that. But I try not to turn on a TV show. I try not to get up to get another cup of coffee. I try to sit there and wait. And if it doesn't come, it doesn't come, but at least I've given it every opportunity to. And I do think a big part of it is just not knowing what's going to happen next. And if I knew that, I knew I would be fine. But unfortunately, that's not the case. But if it's my job, I got to sit there and make it happen.
Yeah, it's like just you have to show up in order for you
Show
can't wait
up.
for
You gotta-
inspiration, right? You have to show up and
No.
let it flow through you.
I've always said you have to be the hardest boss you've ever had when you're working for yourself. You have got to be difficult on yourself to make it happen, because if you have too much freedom, you're going to run with it every time.
Oh, I like that. That's good. Amanda, a burning question for authors in the US that make a living from writing. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me take a step back. I actually meant to ask that to Melissa.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
It's
One
all right.
last question for you, Melissa, because
I'm here. I'm ready.
this is a US-based question, and Amanda,
Okay.
you're in the UK. Melissa, the burning question for authors in the US that make a living from writing is, do you make enough to pay your own health insurance and 401k plan, or do you rely on your spouse for that?
Interesting question. I am married, but I definitely make enough to pay for my own health care, and have set up a retirement fund for myself that I pay into every single month. And that's another myth that I hear all the time, is when I make a point of telling someone that I'm a full-time writer and able to support myself, they always fall, well, you're married, that's why a single person couldn't. And that is so not true. I don't need that extra income. I would be just fine on my own. It just happens to be that I'm married. But yes, the answer to that, the person asking that question, is I can definitely afford my own healthcare in America.
That's
As
fantastic.
do friends of mine who are single and writing full-time, and I know pay for their own healthcare.
Okay, great. Okay, Amanda, I'm sorry about that. Do you follow a daily schedule when you write, or do you let your creativity dictate when you write?
No, I am like Jay. I am meticulous. I must have a plan. I have to get a minimum of 1,500 words down every day. And I can't do anything else until I've done that. So that's the first thing I do. I have everything planned out. I did actually go through writer's block for the first time ever recently. If we'd had this panel sort of 4 months ago, I would have gone, oh, writer's block, never had that. But then COVID-19 happened, and suddenly I couldn't write, and everything just went terrible. But yeah, I have a plan where I will try to write, and if I get those 1,500 words done by 11, 12 o'clock, then I can spend the afternoon doing other things, marketing or whatever, or meeting Claire for brunch, or if I don't get them done, it just sort of drifts on into the afternoon and evening. And I think one of the things is when you work for yourself, like Melissa was saying, you are quite hard on yourself. And I work every weekend, I work every evening. I don't have a 9 to 5. I just kind of keep going, and my wife does the same thing that I do. So we just kind of keep on going, and I have a schedule of things I want to achieve in a day, but I'll never get to the end of it, so that will always tick over to the next day. But that 1,500 words is critical, and that's always the first thing I do.
Yeah, it's good to have that writing goal, so you know exactly where you are, how you're heading towards it, and whether you've met it or not. We had a question come in that I thought was interesting. Claire, do you follow reviews?
I kind of have a quick browse, maybe once a month, something like that, just to see if there's anything constructive I can take from things. But yeah, I used to, when I first published books, literally like every single time one come in, you're like, oh, what have they said? And then I realized that actually that was just going to drive me nuts. So I stopped. And then I kind of started to use a few of them for marketing research, things like that, putting them into little memes and things like that, so they can be quite handy. But yeah, in general, I don't really try to pay too much attention. I do appreciate them, I love them, but I think, yeah, you can tie yourself up in knots with them sometimes, because you could have 50 fantastic 5-star reviews and you'll get one really crappy one, and that's the one that's going to just go, I can't do it, I can't write, and that's it, you're done for the day. So yeah, I just try and avoid.
That's great. Does anybody else want to answer that question as well? Lise.
Yeah, for me, actually, reviews, as in like feedback or how people perceive my book, is for me more important than sales or ranking. It's what makes me happy. So yeah, I definitely follow them. I don't follow them meticulously, but I do. It's very important to me. And if they're bad, I have very thick skin. I don't mind, but I do want to know.
Jay, we had a question come in. Do the less fic publishers offer advances? Would you be able to add some insight to this?
Yeah, sure. I have to say I can only speak for my publisher, but I think it's true for most publishers. Less fic publishers or women loving women fiction is very small publishing houses, so most of them don't offer an advance. Ilbert Publishing doesn't. But you have to realize even if you got an advance, you have to earn it back. So it's not that you get more money, you just get it sooner if you get an advance. So I prefer not getting it and just getting it as the books are being sold anyway.
Melissa?
I can just speak for my publishing company. I'm with Bold Strokes and we are advanced. I think every single author is advanced.
Excellent. We had a question come in about, now that we know Amanda writes 1,500 words per day, I wonder how many words other panelists write in a day. Would you all like to share your writing goals?
Sure. I'll kick us off. It depends. It depends on how far I am from my deadline and what the little math equation says I need to write that day to put myself steadily on the path to making it. Generally, right now, I think it told me yesterday I needed 1,400, and that's kind of standard. But if I have slacked off, it might say a much higher number, and I have to make up what I didn't do.
Yeah. Claire, do you have a writing goal?
Not really, no. I tend to sit down and I can be there for like 8 hours just and knock out 6,000-7,000 words, and then that gives me a day off, so I go for brunch. And then but yeah, I tend to write as and when it's flowing, and I write for as long as I can and as much as I can, even if it's rubbish, and I go back and delete it all later. It's down. And I started one last week. I think I've got about 10,000 words on it now. But I'm kind of, there's 2 of them going now, so I'm a bit, I don't know. But yeah, I don't have a goal. If I set goals, I tend to automatically rebel against it. So I'm one of those troublemakers. So if you tell me I've got to do something, I won't do it. So there's no point me trying to tell myself to do it either.
That's funny. Lise, do you have a writing goal?
Yes, 2,000 a day. I didn't have one before, but then sometimes I'd sit up until midnight and my wife got really cranky. So now I stop at 2,000.
And Jay?
Mm-hmm. Mine is 2,002, and I wish I were more like Amanda, who meets her goal at like 12 or something like that. I'm a very slow writer, even though no one believes me, but I'm really slow because I edit while I write. I can't do it any other way. And so it might take me until the evening to meet that word count goal.
Very good. Let's see, Amanda, were you nervous the first time that you tried to publish a manuscript? Do you have any advice on getting past those initial nerves when you hit that publish button?
Yeah, well, it's difficult for me because I was asked by Jay's publisher, Ilva. I'd written a fan fiction and they approached me and asked if I wanted to make it into a book, and I was like, and ignored it. And then Astrid kept talking to me and I was like, oh, this is real, this is an actual publishing house. So yeah, after a while I was like, why not? And I was still working, and I didn't really put much thought into it, to be honest, because I thought it would be like nice to have, like I'd have a book with my name on it and then I'd go back to marketing and my life. But then I decided that actually it was quite nice to be able to do that for a living, and I work for myself anyway, so it was just a sort of different kind of making things up, not making things up for an insurance company, making things up for fun. So yeah, I was nervous when I decided to go on my own, because I worked out that if I wanted to make a living at it, I would have to control it myself, because with the best will in the world, many publishing houses aren't going to be able to pay you what you want or necessarily get the schedule that you want. I think, you know, you'd have to be in quite a lucky situation for that to all pan out. And for me, it was just better to go on my own, because I'm quite a control freak anyway. So that first book was very much like, do I know what I'm doing? But I'm quite a confident person, so I just kind of researched the crap out of it, and it ended up being okay. But my advice for other people would be to really do your research and approach authors, and not just one or two, approach a multitude of authors. We're a friendly bunch, we all help each other. And try to get advice and try to see, because there's so many different ways to write books and there's so many different ways to publish books. For some people, traditional publishing is absolutely what you want to do. For other people, self-publishing, and there's hybrids and all kinds of things you can do. So I think get as much research done and get as much advice from different people and try to figure out what works for you. That's the best way to get started, and eventually you'll cobble together a plan that's going to work for your situation.
Melissa, in terms of marketing, what types of marketing do you apply to your books?
Well, I think for me personally, social media is huge, and I am traditionally published, and I have a publisher, so they handle a lot of marketing for me. And just to caveat, what Amanda just said was absolutely correct. Everybody is different, and you have to match up your personality to, you know, whether you want to handle every aspect of publishing or whether you want to hand over some of that. And for me, I did want to hand over a lot of those extra jobs were so that I could focus on the creative. But marketing is something that we split. And so my social media presence is hugely important. It's a way for me to kind of reach out and let people know what's going on with the books and what's coming out next. My website was something that I found to be hugely important, and I wanted it to be professional, and I wanted to go out and seek a company that can make it seem that I took this very seriously, because I do, and I take my job seriously. So I think having a website that says that you're a professional goes a long way, and I would recommend seeking out somebody or a company who can design it for you. That is one investment that I've never thought twice about, and has proven to be very, very helpful in the long run. But I am the type of person that I like to hand some of that stuff over to a publisher, and I'm grateful that mine does some fantastic marketing, both stateside and internationally, so I don't have to worry about it. Oh, Susie, you're muted.
Thank you. Lise, we had a question come in for you. You had 11 books since 2017. Did you have a few partially finished and sitting in your computer, or was that 11 from start to finish? She said she's amazed.
Thank you. Well, it came out in 2017, my first book, but I started in 2017 too. Okay, it came out at the end. But well, I guess if you make a living from writing, I personally have to write 4 books a year, and in some cases it's been a bit more than that. So if you write every day, all day, then it's totally doable. So if I continue to be so lucky to be inspired to write more books, then I hope I can continue this way.
Claire, do you have a newsletter? So if so, can you speak a little bit about how you build that newsletter mailing list, and how many books maybe you should have published before digging into this?
Yeah, I mean, when I first started, I didn't have a clue about mailing list marketing or any of that stuff. I was just winging it. I'm winging life. But eventually Amanda said, no, you must have a newsletter. So I said, okay, I'll get one. And then I had like 5 people on it, and I was like, woo, there we go. And but yeah, it gradually builds. You just keep little tricks, you know. Again, Amanda was, you know, put something in the back of your book to encourage people to just click on there and sign up. Or I've got a free, so my debut book is free. If you sign up to my mailing list, you'll get that automatically. So yeah, it does build quite quickly, and then it's just a matter of trying to work out what you're going to put in it. That's the most difficult bit. That's the bit I get stuck on. And then some weeks it's like loads of stuff to tell people, and then other weeks I've got nothing. So yeah, I'm trying to work that out at the moment with my newsletter as to whether I need to just be winging it with it and just send them as and when, or whether I need to just go, nope, it's going to go out on the last Thursday of every month. I need to kind of work that out. So I'm getting there, guys, somehow.
That's great. Amanda, do you have any insights on this? I'm sure you do, because yeah, let's hear your insights on the newsletter.
Yeah, newsletter, I recommend that you start it as soon as possible, because every time someone picks up your book, there's a chance that they're going to want to know more about you. And if there's no social media links, no email marketing links, no nothing, then you could just drift away and they'll never think of you again. So every touch point that you have with a reader is a chance for you to sort of capture their data, to advise them of every other project you're doing. If you're going to an event, if you've released an audio book, if you've released a book, so there's plenty you can talk about. But for me, start straight away. If you have, I mean, we've all been there. We all have that mailing list like Claire, where you have sort of 4 or 5 people and one of them is you, because you have to test it and you think this is ridiculous. I'm like, I emailed my wife like the first few times and I was like, did you get that? Yeah. And eventually it grows. Eventually other people, other than people you actually know, get onto the list. I mean, I'm sort of, I think I'm approaching 4,000 subscribers now, and I clean out my list a lot. That's another thing. When you're further along and you have all those people, don't just try to get anyone. You want the most engaged list. You pay for subscribers with many different mailing platforms. So, you know, when you start off, you want as many people as possible, and you will have, you know, the postman, absolutely fine. He can find out when your next book is coming out. But then as you get further along, you have to start curating that list. And it's a great situation. You'll get there quickly as well. You'll be surprised how quickly those lists grow, and you don't think about it anymore after a while. You know, it's the same with social media. You start off with just, you know, a few people, all friends who you've bribed and begged and borrowed for them to come and follow you. And then eventually, you know, actual real people start coming along. So yeah, start as soon as you can.
Yeah, that's great. Jay, there's a question that came in about plot problems. What do you do when you get stuck on a plot problem? I think this is a problem that happens to a lot of us writers.
Well, since I'm a plotter, I work them out separate from the actual writing. So I know this beforehand and I won't waste the time writing 50,000 words and then I realize the plot isn't working. So I think that's an advantage. Yeah, I brainstorm it with one of my critique partners mostly. And I have alpha readers, one alpha reader who, it's like a beta reader, but she reads along as I write the book, and she'll send it back to me. And because of the time difference, because I'm in Germany, she's in the US, I have the feedback overnight. And in the next morning, I start my writing session with her feedback. That is very helpful. Yeah, and if I run into anything that isn't working, I can brainstorm it with my critique partners and my alpha readers. Yeah, so I would definitely encourage anyone who has never heard of beta readers or who doesn't have them to get at least 2 or 3. I have more like 12. That's super helpful, and it will also cut down on your editing costs, because every beta reader notices different things. There are beta readers who will tell you the emotions aren't quite there on the page because they're all in your head and you didn't manage to get them down on the page. There are beta readers who will tell you there's a typo somewhere. So each has their little specialty. And yeah, it gives you a fuller picture, and it also helps with the plot problems.
Thank you. Lise, can you describe what self-marketing efforts you put forth for each of your books? Like, where do you advertise, if you do, or is it more organic promotions that you do, and what platforms?
I just use the social media platforms available to me. I use, you know, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I use Amazon marketing. I use Facebook marketing. I've used radio twice. I have advertised in magazines, and I'm currently trying to get into the Spanish-speaking market. So then I will go to specific platforms that are, for example, online magazines or magazines. yeah, to reach those readers. It depends on what I'm doing.
Claire, do you use different platforms? If so, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same as everyone else. Social media is kind of the biggest and easiest space to be on. And I just do anything Amanda tells me. But it's difficult as well, because I'm doing this thing at the moment where I'm actually kind of trying to define my numbers down, because I've accumulated quite a lot of friends and followers on Facebook and Twitter and things like that, but they're not really people who engage with me. So I think a lot of the times we just become a number for somebody else, and so I'm trying to kind of work out who are my specific audience there, and try and work harder at sort of being more engaged with people who want to actually talk to me, or who I want to speak to as well. So yeah, but it's mostly social media.
There's a question that came in for parents on the panel. This one is for, can you speak to how parenthood impacts your writing schedule, if at all? Melissa.
Oh, it does. It does, dear question asker. Well, are we talking pre-pandemic or post? Pre-pandemic, I have a good portion of the day, early in the day, to myself, and then after lunch, I get the kiddo back, and then we spend the afternoon together. So there is a ticking clock on a typical day for me to get my word count in, so that I can move on and put my mom hat on. It's very different now because he's home, and if you don't know, he's 2. And he's got a lot of demands. But I still have a full-time job, and I still have a daily word count. And so it has been an uphill battle of figuring out how to make it work. And it's come down to writing in short spurts, in the morning before he gets up, during a nap, when I can pawn him off, whatever I can do to make it happen. But it's a lot more touch and go now, and a little less regimented than before the pandemic. But yeah, having a little one in the house changes everything for sure.
Jay, do publishers choose your proofreaders or betas, or is that something that the author can choose for themselves?
Usually, it's a little different for me because I'm also ILBA Publishing senior editor, so I have more control over who I work with, and I know the editors and what kind of editor I need, or the book needs. But usually it's the publisher who picks, because they know their editors and they know the manuscript and they know what fits together and what kind of support each author needs.
Thank you. This is a question for the self-published writers. Other than Amazon, what factors influence your decision on whether to make your books available on other platforms? For example, Kobo, Smashwords, maybe even your own website. Who would like to take this one? Amanda. Okay, cool.
Okay, for me, I'm nearly always exclusive to Amazon because I'm enrolled in Kindle Unlimited. So for those who don't know, Kindle Unlimited, or KU, is a subscription service where readers pay a flat fee. And I don't know what it is. It's $9.99? No, I don't know. It's some flat fee, and you can read any book that's enrolled in the KU platform. And we get paid per page, but it's such a minuscule amount that you can't actually calculate it at around cent per page. I think it's something like 0.0042 cents per page, something like that. So we get a tiny amount in comparison to if a book was sold, but the potential of getting new readers is incredible. And I know that I've personally gained huge numbers of readers through using the KU platform. But if you're on KU with Amazon, you have to be exclusive to Amazon, which means you cannot have your books in other places. So for me, because I started off wide with a traditional publishing house, I do have a small audience of wide readers, as we refer to them. That's not a sizes thing, just wide as in wide distribution. I do have some, but I don't have many. And because I've been in Kindle Unlimited for the last, how many books? I don't know, 16, 17 books. I've released a lot, I don't know, but most of them in KU. So I've naturally developed a list of KU readers and Amazon readers. So the few times I do go wide, nothing happens and I sell about 10 books. And when you're used to sort of selling like 20, 30 books, it's a bit of a waste of time. But for anyone starting out new, that would be a different question. If you can get traction wide, I know many authors, even self-published authors who have a huge wide audience, and they sell tons and tons on Apple, almost as much as they do on Amazon. So it is very different for every author. But for me, I am stuck at the moment being exclusive with Amazon.
There's a question that came in. My books earn decently well and they're well reviewed, but I've been stuck at about half what I would like to make. What key moves helped you make the move from part-time income to full-time income? Melissa, would you like to tackle this?
Well, it's hard to say. I think that's the secret sauce. First thing, I would look at how much you're writing a year. I know that if I were writing, one book a year as opposed to the 3 that I'm currently writing, I think my paycheck would be smaller. So if you can write faster, that's better. But at the same time, you don't want to sacrifice quality. So if you think speeding up is going to take away from who you are as a writer, then maybe don't go that route. But if you can manage it, if you know you have more to give, writing a little faster might help that income a little bit. Professional events, networking was great for me early on. I went to my first professional writing conference before my book was out and made some key contacts. And each time I've gone to a new event, I think that only increases exponentially. So, and when you have those networking moments and you're able to pick up a new friend or colleague, we help each other out and we invite each other to events. And sometimes you get some great exposure by going to another author's event because now you're in front of their audience and they're in a way endorsing you by having you there. So I would say make sure that your world is broad and you're reaching out to other people who do what you do, but do it successfully. And follow in the footsteps a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's hard to say what makes a book sell. And it's genre specific as well. We can be honest, romance is going to sell better than mysteries do. And that's not to say that the mystery novel is not as fantastic. It's just a matter of numbers. Romance sells better. So the romance novelists do have a leg up when it comes to making money. And I know it's not fun if you don't write romance to hear that, but it's just a fact of the game.
Yes, I agree. There's a question for those who are signed to mainstream publishers. What was the process to sign, and has it benefited you to do this? Or do you in retrospect wish you had signed with publishers geared towards women loving women communities to sell more books? Jay, do you want to answer this?
I think we are pretty much all signed with women loving women presses. Mainstream is very different. If you're thinking like the big 5, this is all very different. And then you have to go via an agent. There's barely any direct submissions with the big mainstream publishers. And when we are talking Bold Strokes and Ilva and Bella and all of the less big presses and women loving women presses, it's usually direct submission. So if you're gonna submit to them, look at their books, what do they have out, look at your bookshelf and see what books you are enjoying and where it's a good fit. Talk to at least 3 different authors, see how happy they are with their publisher. It's mostly about finding a publisher or self-publishing, whatever is the best fit for you. And it very much depends on personality. Like if you feel that you want to have the full control over every aspect of publishing, then maybe you want to self-publish. But if you feel like, no, you just want to write and you don't want to bother with finding an editor and finding a cover artist, and you would be happy to give up some of the control, then I think a publisher is a good choice for you. And then it's just a matter of finding the publisher that fits you.
That was a great answer. Thank you so much for that, Jay.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about getting books translated into different languages. What is the process of this? And does the publisher dictate this? If it's independent, how does this work? Can anybody speak to this? Okay, Jay?
Well, first of all, I translate my own work back into my native language. So it's not really about, yeah, it is translating, but it's a lot more creative. But I've also, one of my books is out in Italian, and one is about to be out in French, and we just signed to get one of my books translated into Portuguese. So usually it's, if you are with a publishing house, there's two options. Either the publisher sells a license, meaning they sell it to a publishing house that publishes books in that language, and then the publisher will get either a one-time payment or incoming royalties every month, and you as an author get a share of that. Or the publishing house, if they do translations, they will hire a translator and an editor and a proofreader, because it's not just about the translation. As with any book, you need an editor and a proofreader, and your publisher will pay all of the costs and will publish it themselves. Ilva Publishing, as an international publisher, for the German stuff, we have the editors, we have the entire German team, and we speak the language, so we can also publish and market it, because it's not just about putting it out, you also need to promote it. And if you don't speak the language, you can't do the promotion. Yeah, so that's your basic options.
Melissa?
I'd happily answer that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
You can go first, Lise. Go ahead. Okay. I could just speak from the author side of it, not from the publisher side of it. I have books in Dutch, French, and Spanish, I believe. And it was a licensing deal, much like Jay described, where the books were licensed to a company that then took them and redesigned covers and handled the translation. And my end of it is that I received a small advance, and then on my royalty statement, every quarter it'll say, you know, waiting in the wings, here's your copies, waiting in the wings Spanish, here's your copies. And so it's just kind of built into my process after that licensing. On to Lise.
So I do it all myself because I'm self-published, and I've had 2 books translated into Spanish, and currently the first one in Hindi is happening right now. And I have to say it's a lot of work, because you have to, because you're self-published, you have to liaise between the translator and the proofreader, because you can't check it, so you have to make sure that everything is properly done. So there is a lot of time and effort and a lot of cost as well going into it. But I do think it's really worth it, and I think it's wonderful if people can, you know, people from everywhere can read your book. It's a really, really special thing. So
Claire, in terms of self-care, what kind of self-care advice do you have for others for those times when authors may not receive the best reviews, or perhaps they don't get the numbers or the results that they were expecting?
I don't know. I quite enjoy a good bitching session with a friend, just to get it out. That tends to work. Generally, yeah. I don't really let things get to me that much. I'll just now, you know, years ago, you know, when I started, yeah, it was horrible. But now we'll make a joke of it. I'll be like, I'll get onto my editor and I'll be like, did you see this one? And then we'll just kind of laugh it off and move on from it very quickly. So yeah, just take everything with a pinch of salt, because you're never ever going to please everybody. It doesn't. We could all write, you know, an award-winning book, and there will always be somebody who goes, oh, it's rubbish. So you just got to accept that there is, you know, I go to the cinema, I don't enjoy every film I watch, whether they've won an Oscar or not. So it's the same with your writing, and you just have to take it on the chin and say, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, that is great advice. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure that you all get a chance to speak on this. What is the thing that gives you inspiration the most for writing? Let's start with Jay.
Yeah, for me, it's mostly my readers. I just this morning had an email from a reader who had read Perfect Rhythm. and this reader is asexual, and she said she was crying through most of the book, not because it's bad, because she never found herself represented in any book she ever read, and this is the first one she discovered. And if you read an email like that, you're blown away and you think, wow, this is exactly the reason. It's not making the money. It's, I mean, making a living is great, but you're not getting super rich. But feedback like that is really why I do it. And that inspires me every day.
Lise. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I did it again. Traveling inspires me. So my setting is always the background, the backdrop for my story. It's always the inspiration for my story. So I'll travel to where my book is set, and that's where I'll get all the ideas, and I'll just observe people and sit somewhere and just look around and soak up the atmosphere, and that's when the story starts coming to me.
Oh, that's great. That sounds wonderful. Was there a favorite spot? Has there been a favorite spot so far?
I think Louisiana. Yeah, just in the sticks. That was really inspiring for me. In the middle of nowhere in the swamps. I loved it. Yeah, and also I think when I write about serious topics, I think the inspiration either comes from within myself or people I see around me. It's just everyday things people struggle with.
That's wonderful. Claire.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what inspires me. Just I just like telling stories and just making stuff up and doing. You can put people into positions that you would never dream of, so you can kind of live vicariously by them. That's quite fun. And you can have them living in ridiculously rich worlds, or they can be having the worst time of their life, and you can just, you can just play around with it. And I think that's kind of quite a lot of fun. And I think, like Jay was saying as well, when you do get feedback from somebody, that is quite in that sort of emotional sense. I had someone who read The Promise, which is about, it's a weepy, it's about cancer, it's about somebody dying of breast cancer, and they read it, and it made them go and get checked, and they actually needed to be checked, which was amazing. So when they wrote and told me that was kind of quite inspiring then, to sort of think, okay, sometimes you can write something that actually means something. So yeah, it was good.
Wow, that's powerful. Melissa?
I just think I love make-believe. and I think I always have. I can look back to when I was 4 years old and arranging all of my dolls and action figures and Matchbox cars, because I had all of those things, and creating a world of just me and them, and all the things that would happen, and all the conflict and the different culture that we would create for our imaginary town. And I don't think that ever left me properly. And maybe I should have grown up and gotten a little bit more serious, but I still like creating imaginary worlds, and I love to sit down every day and continue to do that. And so that's why I tell people I think I have the best job on the planet, because I get to play make-believe.
And Amanda?
I've been accustomed to food and shelter, so I find that inspires me. But I think it's the what if. I think most of my ideas for stories come from what if. Like, what if a very rich and wealthy woman with autistic traits was sat on a plane and saw a small 5-year-old boy opposite? What would she couldn't process while he was there? And I think the what if scenario, that's what inspires me to write, and then to continue writing, is just the community, from having readers contact me, which is always amazing, and just mind blown when someone actually takes the time to email you or tweet you or whatever and say, I've enjoyed this book, or it resonated with me, like Claire was saying. That's just an incredible feeling. And the other authors, it is a community. Jay was saying that she doesn't see her fellow authors as competition, but more like colleagues. And I always think of that. I always think that we all work together in a big sort of building, the author building, and we just happen to be on different floors and we don't always see each other, but we all work together for the same common purpose. And I really love that. I love that sense of community that we have in all respects. So that's what inspires me.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, we have reached the end of our time. Before I hand it back over to Sandy, I just want to thank all of you for being here. You received a whole bunch of chats. Gosh, so many wonderful chats are coming in saying that you've inspired everybody. Everybody just loved this panel and they want to thank you. And I want to thank you as well on behalf of GCLS for being here and sharing your insights. It was really powerful. The conversation was wonderful. And so we will hand it back over to our host, Sandy Thornton.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you for a wonderful panel. I think it was really great, and the comments certainly indicate that. Right now, we have Invisible Disabilities in LESVIC, which is our next panelist going on right now. So bye-bye.